Trying to catch long passes in the 1970s could be challenging. In 1962, NFL teams averaged 7.1 yards per pass attempt, which was the highest ever through the 1977 season. Just 15 years later, in 1977, the average dropped to 5.2, an almost 30% decrease. I'll touch on the reasons for that decrease later. Here are 11 men who consistently excelled at catching long passes. They averaged over 20 yards per catch with at least 40 receptions in a single season during the decade of the 1970s. They will be featured chronologically, and all footage depicted is from the year discussed. Only 14-game seasons are considered, since major rule changes in 1978 made pass catching a far easier task than before. Yards per pass is the best statistical measure of a team's passing attack and an excellent indicator of its offensive capability. In 1968 and 1969, Warren Wells had over 40 catches and 20 yards per catch. He made it 3 years in a row in 1970, which was unfortunately his last NFL season. Before tight end Dave Casper was nicknamed Ghost, Gary Garrison was, and he did what Casper never accomplished. The 1960s were wild and wacky. They were also exploding with 28 receiving yard seasons of at least 1,200. Lance Allworth did it the most times with 5. Only one time did a receiver in the 1970s accomplish the feat, and that was in a 16-game schedule. Steve Largent. In 1964 and 1965, Chargers great Lance Allworth averaged better than 20 yards per catch with over 40 catches. His wide receiver mate Gary Garrison equaled his 2-time accomplishment when he turned the trick again in 1971. You knew that the great Paul Warfield would be on this list. 43 grabs with a sizzling 23.2 yards per catch. Bullet Bob Hayes fell short with only 35 catches, but his 24.0 yards per catch warrants footage. "1973 was a big year. For the third time in 4 years, John Gilliam caught 40-plus passes with over 20 yards per catch. He narrowly missed in 1971. Intimidation was one of the reasons for receiving numbers dropping in the 1970s. Another reason was the advent of the 3-4 defense and the increasing complexity of defensive zone coverages. The University of Oklahoma sported a 3-4 defense in 1973, and the three down linemen were the Salmon brothers, Leroy, Lucius, and Dewey. Oklahoma head coach Chuck Fairbanks left Oklahoma after the 1972 season, but he took the 3-4 defense to the New England Patriots with him, and they are considered to be the first NFL team to utilize it with regular employment. In the late 1950s, the Bears and Colts used it on rare occasions, and in the mid-60s, the Bills used it on a part-time basis.
It could be pretty effective both ways, the 3-4 defense. The way the Patriots use it is basically a run-oriented defense because we use a lot of pursuit in the defense. But also last year we were one of the teams that had the most sacks, against the passer also. So it can be pretty effective both ways.
In 1969 and 1970, Chargers defensive coordinator Bum Phillips used it some. Miami's 53 defense was a 3-4 defense in 1972 and 1973, but it wasn't their base defense. It was more of a hybrid nickel defense where number 53 Bob Matheson could either cover the pass or line up in an attempt to stop the run. The Saints used the 3-4 a lot in 1974, so much that it almost qualified as their base defense, but not quite. The Oilers used it permanently in 1974, but it was after the in-season trade that involved John Matuzak and Curly Culp. In 1975, the Denver Broncos utilized it, and with maturation, they rode it all the way to the Super Bowl for the 1977 season. In 1976, the Oakland Raiders had a rash of injuries to players on their defensive line, so they were more or less forced to adopt it. The 3-4 defense aided in trying to kill the bomb because it allowed up to 8 pass defenders to drop back into coverage, which helps to clutter the passing lanes. Former college track star Isaac Curtis took his speed to the NFL and tormented opposing defenses on long gainers. Oilers deep threat Ken Burrow was a 1970 first-round draft pick by the Saints, who traded him to Houston in January 1971 because they thought that he heard footsteps, that he was afraid of getting hit. Team Talk also had it that he played too uptight, and that it caused him to lose concentration. Whatever the case, Double O Ken Burrell put up big numbers for the Oilers team and head coach Bum Phillips. Charlie Joyner was another wide receiver who was traded before he broke out. The Oilers packaged him with linebacker Ron Pritchard for running backs Fred Willis and Paul Robinson in October 1972. Then the Bengals traded him to San Diego for defensive end Coy Bacon on April 2nd, 1976. Joyner's 1,056 receiving yards in 1976 was 330 more than his previous 7-year best, and his 50 catches was a career high at that time. In 1977, Wesley Walker had a 21.1 yards per catch, but missed out being added to this list by only 5 catches. At Cal, he set the NCAA yards per catch record with 25.7 over his career. Fellow speedster Mel Gray also narrowly missed. His yards per catch was 20.6, but he fell 2 receptions short. In 1977, the NFC's 4.79 yards per pass attempt was almost 1 full yard less than the AFC, and I think that it's a reason for the AFC's 19-win, 9-loss record versus the NFC in regular season competition. In 1977, teams that completed a 40-plus yard touchdown pass won almost 66% of their games. Please support me by clicking the like button, adding a comment, and sharing this video so that the memories of the 1970s NFL can be appreciated more. As always, thank you for watching.